Now, you are Ross Stevenson.
I am.
And you are the most successful radio broadcaster in the history of the... I'm making this up. I reckon that's right. The most successful broadcaster on Australian radio ever. You've been the #1 breakfast radio announcer for 30 years.
Well,
It's correct, any of that.
it's largely correct, yeah, I guess.
How long do you think you want to keep going?
Well, as luck would have it, Sam, as you know, I've had two older children.
Yes.
And a bit like yourself,
Yes,
Sam.
that's it.
And younger children.
Yep.
I fully expect. I've got an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old as well as a 24-year-old.
Yep.
I fully expected to have a 4-year-old at this stage of my life. I just thought it'd be a racehorse. Right. So, I'll be going for a while because there'll be school fees to be paid.
Well, your great love, other than the fact that you're successful at what you do on the radio, is football. Why are you in love with football?
I come from Brisbane, from Queensland, and when we moved down here, the rest of my family chose to barrack for Melbourne. But I went to Glenferrie State School.
Yep.
So as a result, as I say to the other members of my family, since then, 12 premierships to nil, you know, but who's counting? Yeah. I love the Hawks. As I say, like a lot of people, I don't follow football, I follow Hawthorn. You know, I love the Hawks.
So,
I love the fact that we can sit there in the stands next to each other, that we don't have to be divided into sections.
Fantastic.
And at the end, when the final siren goes, one group of people are happy and one group of people are sad.
But they don't have a bun fight or no punch-ups necessarily, is there?
No.
It's a unique thing that's in this country, unlike any other sport in the world almost.
Yeah, I remember talking to John Button. Did he barrack for Geelong?
He did indeed.
The senator, and he said that when they finished the sitting week in Canberra, the Labors and Liberals and different parties would get on the plane to fly back to Melbourne, and they would always have football to talk about. He said it was incredible social glue.
It is, it's amazing. And you wouldn't be one of those, I don't think, I'm not putting words in your mouth, wouldn't be one of those purists. I've got a feeling, don't give us stuff how the game's played as long as your side wins.
Yep.
Is that basically right?
Yeah.
Basically.
I'm a bit like Kevin Bartlett. I agree with Kevin on the subject of interchange. I think if we'd reduce the number of rotations, players would get tired and the game would free up a bit. They'd be a bit more attractive.
So of all the great people that you know at Hawthorn and love, one of them I've got a feeling captivated your imagination more than any, and that was the great goal kicker, Peter Hudson. Why did you become enamoured with him?
He was a phenomenon because he kicked 150 goals a year. He kicked 146 in another year. Of course, got a bad knee injury.
Yep, he did.
And then came back a few years after that and kicked 110 goals in a year despite his knee injury. I was there the day he did his knee, which was round 1. I can't remember which year, but round 1 he did it, I think, just after half-time or just before half-time, and that was it for the season.
Yep.
And they tallied up at the Brownlow that year, back in the day where they didn't say which game the votes were, they just read them out. They announced P. Hudson 2 votes. So everyone knew that he got 2 votes for kicking 8 goals in the only half of football he played for that year. You know Peter, he's a wonderful person.
He is.
I met him at a function at the MCG years ago, and he told me that he listened to the radio program every morning. And I said, "Excuse me, Peter, won't you?" And I went and I rang my mother.
Did you?
And I said, "Mum, I've just listened to Peter Hudson. He listens to me on the radio."
Fantastic.
I couldn't believe it.
So you now write a letter of love to the football world every year. What inspired you to do that, and what do you tell people, and what do you tell the people who love football about the game?
It was inspired by the fact that, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago I was asked to speak at the Norm Smith oration to the MCC. I didn't actually give the Norm Smith oration. It was David Parkin who did that, and I was asked to respond.
Yes.
And what I did was...
I've heard you speak, and you're brilliant.
I sat down and wrote a love letter to football about all the things that I love about the game. I played 150 games of amateur football.
Yes, we'll get on to that in a minute.
Yeah, and so I write about my time in amateur football, where I made a position on the field my very own, that of petrified lair. I made my own. There's so much about football that I love. The characters it throws up. Bobby Davis.
Bobby, yes, that's right.
We get Bobby.
Yep.
Fair dinkum
Fair dinkum
unbelievable.
unbelievable.
Yeah. I have a friend who's a Collingwood supporter who they were getting beaten by St Kilda a few years back, and it was extremely vexing to her. So she stood up and yelled out, "Put your hand up if you've seen your team win a premiership on colour television."
That's good. And we have some history. I believe we went to the inaugural, is this right? We went to the inaugural game that Adelaide played, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
And we went over for 3AW.
We went over with 3AW and I think Rex and Bill.
Rex and Bill, who sat apart from one another.
Yes, and Hawthorn were expected to win.
That's right.
But at half-time, I think they were at least 10 goals down.
And we went over for what reason? You went over because you're a Hawthorn man,
yeah,
and I went over because I was meant to be the special comments.
Yeah.
And you did the stats.
That's right.
I remember?
I did the stats.
And Rex did the call, and the ball goes down to the half-forward line. How many goals has Watson kicked, Ross? And you said, you just made it up.
I just made it up.
7.
7.
He said, has he? He said, yep, he has. I remember that.
I'll tell you one thing I remember about that. That was the night I met David Hooks, because David Hooks was working in Adelaide, 5AA. And David, of course, knew Bill Jacobs when Bill was the
cricketer,
the manager of the Australian cricket team, and Hooksy was playing. So anyway, Hawthorn's supposed to win. Half-time, Hawthorn's 10 goals down, and Hooksy walks from the 5AA broadcast box up to Bill and hands him a scrumpled up bit of paper and walks off. And I'd never met David Hooks, but I knew it was David. I was so excited. And Bill unravels the paper and it says, "Where do we get finals tickets?"
Fantastic.
And do you remember,
subtle.
you and I not only worked at the first ever game that the Adelaide Crows played in, we went to the first interstate final played in Perth to see Hawthorn play the Eagles.
Was Pricey with us?
I can't remember.
We
We
did
with Shane
Healy.
Shane
Oh,
Healy,
Shane Healy, wasn't
and we had to sit in the stands.
That's right, we did too.
And you were doing special comments.
That's right.
But you were sitting directly behind a post.
That's correct. That's exactly
and
right.
Shane Healy would go, and that was a magnificent session of play there that got the Eagles back. And that beautiful goal there, Sam Newman. What did you make of it? And you would go, post.
Yeah, that's right. Post. Couldn't see it. The ball just went out of view because it went down one end of the ground. That's right. We've had quite a bit of history on the football. And of course, just some of Rex's calls, being either listening to them or being part of it on the day has been extraordinary.
Oh, gee. What are your favourite names? I was listening one day and Richmond was playing and he said, and the ball comes down and it's marked by the hit. And the hit kicks it to the wing, and I'm going there. And then it comes around, a lovely spoil there by the hit. And who's the hit? So I look it up, and I work out, yes, Richmond player Paul Bullis. Bullis hit.
Too cryptic for me. And not a well man, the Essendon man. I know all of them, and Yablet.
Remember the day that the Carlton player, I can't remember his first name, but his surname was Pearce.
Oh, yes.
Right. There's been an interchange here, Rex.
That's right. Oh, he used to love that. He
goes, Newman's gone and...
Cam, Stevenson on, Pearce off.
Yeah.
But he then in the end, he just wouldn't even try and smother it. He'd say, Stevenson on, piss off.
That's right.
And everyone would go, oh, gee, that's a bit rough. What's wrong with that? He'd say. That feigned indignation.
It was fun, wasn't
it? It was good. Yeah. Now you're you don't just write love letters about football. You've actually been part of the game. You've had a stellar career of many games in the amateurs. How many?
I think 152. You're never quite sure because they would often, if you had an unregistered player that they wanted to play and you were injured, that player would play under your name. So there's a fair chance that 10 or 20 of my 152 was some unregistered player.
And what was your long suit? What was your forte in amateur football?
Well, I'll give you an example. It's more the gathering of intelligence. 1 year, this is F grade, right?
Yep.
F grade amateurs.
Okay.
There's nothing below. That was the
I
lowest.
wouldn't have thought there would have been a lot below F grade, but anyhow.
So we turn up for a fresh season and we have to go out and play Coolaroo Rovers. Now, we're a bit worried about what Coolaroo Rovers might be like in terms of roughness. So I was dispatched to go and talk to their coach during the reserves game, talk to their coach and find out a bit about the team. So I stood next to him and I said, now listen, hi, how are you, Ross? And, you're the coach of this team, is that right? He goes, yes. I said, oh, that's interesting. What do you do for a living? He said, I'm a social worker. I go, phew, that's good. Social worker, he'd be a very gentle soul. Where do you work? He said, I work at Pentridge Prison. Oh, that's interesting. That's what, very big-hearted of you. What do you do there? He said, I help violent long-term offenders prepare for release into general society. I said, that's interesting. How do you do that? He said, why, getting them to play for this football team. Right.
Oh, dear.
Yeah,
That's
so
fantastic.
before the first bounce, our centre-half forward was a doctor. And he stuck his hand out to his opponent, and his opponent said, I'm going to put you in hospital. And our bloke said, I'm a doctor. The bloke said, good, you'll know your way around.
That's fantastic. So were you weren't put? Were you careful? Careful? Were you a careful player?
I was a very careful, and yet, mind you did have to be careful.
You would.
It was pretty.
It's
willing.
a different game.
Yeah. But we had some great coaches. We had a fabulous coach, Kenny Frensham, who many people will make this claim, but Kenny actually said to us one night, pair up in threes.
That's right.
He said, over here, fellas, under the lights where it's warmer. And one night at training asked us to line up alphabetically in order of height. Well, that took the whole training session.
John Kennedy, who's just been made did that bring a tear to your eye, or was it long overdue?
Yeah, I was surprised that it hadn't happened
You're an emotional
earlier.
man about Hawthorn.
I remember, I just got to talk about the first thing that comes into my head. I emceed a lunch years ago at which the two speakers were John Kennedy Sr. and Alan Jeans. And Alan Jeans, they were talking about the 1971 grand final, where Hawthorn won, coached by John Kennedy Sr. and Alan coached the Saints. And Alan Jeans said to Kennedy, to the audience, he goes, go and tell them what a genius you are with that move you made, putting Bob Keddy in the forward line. Go and tell everyone what a genius you were. Kennedy said, I got to three-quarter time, and I said to Keddy, I said, Robert, you've been useless. Just go down into the forward pocket and try to keep out of the way. that was his. And Jenny Schwab, Peter's wife, was telling me the other day that she was sitting next to him in the last few years at a game when Josh Kennedy had just been nominated for Clio Bachelor of the Year. And Jen said, John, what do you think about the fact that Josh has been nominated for Clio Bachelor of the Year? And he said, Jen, there are no words. No words.
And you're somewhat of a, I'm saying you're somewhat of a recluse. Not many people know a lot about you. This is by design, I'm sure, but I'm told you were a chorister. Is that the word? A chorister? A lad in the choir?
I was a chorister at St Paul's Cathedral in the city.
St Paul's?
Yeah.
I see.
Which is how I got a scholarship to school. Otherwise I couldn't have gone.
What was it?
And we had to, at the conclusion of every school day, go into the city to St Paul's to do practice and then sing at a service. So, and had to do that twice on Sundays. So it was
hymns and things.
Yeah, hymns and the like.
What is your favourite hymn?
Off the top of my head, Christ is our cornerstone, on him alone we build.
Is it?
Yeah.
I'm 656A out of the English hymnal, Jerusalem.
Oh yeah, and did those feet in ancient times.
Did those?
March upon England's.
And was the
Mount
holy
Haynes
Lamb
green.
of God on England's pleasant pasture seen, and did his countenance divine rain shine forth upon our clouded hill, until Jerusalem was builded here in all those dark satanic mills. Well, what are some of the most memorable things you've ever been part of that you've had to break the news or speak about?
I've been off air for just about every big story of the entire time I've been on the radio.
Because the wrong time group for the
9/11
Northern Hemisphere, isn't it?
No. Holidays. 9/11 I was in Hong Kong. Princess Di, I was on holidays. Princess Di. I was listening to 3AW. It was a Sunday. You were probably working.
I
were you?
was. I know. Yeah, what you're going to say. Yep.
And it was just before a finals game or
Yep,
something
it
like that.
was.
But anyway, it was a Sunday afternoon, I think. And just before the bounce of the ball, Rex said, but I have to break in here, ladies and gentlemen. We have to go back to the newsroom who are going to tell us that Princess Di has died.
Oh,
I thought they would never see a story bigger than 9/11 in my lifetime.
Yep.
And I have. The pandemic. May I ask you a question?
Please.
You and I have been to the Formula One Grand Prix
We have.
in Melbourne, and we both regarded it as one of the great sports. Have you lost any love for it since they lost the engine noise?
What a question. I'm very glad you asked that. I was watching during this pandemic, in place of all the Grand Prix that are on at the minute, they showed the 1992 Grand Prix at, I call it Monaco, people call it Monaco. And I could hear the engines and the crowd loved, and it came into they refueled them then, and it almost vibrated the stands to the ground. I thought, isn't that fantastic? And I remember us at the Grand Prix here when the first year they took the engines out and replaced them with half electric engines. And I either said to you or you said to me, when are the cars going to warm up? And I said, one of us said, they're warming up. They just went past then. And I said, no, when are they actually going to race? I said, they're racing.
That first year that you and I went to when they had the new engines, I said that there's some bloke mowing the lawn.
That's right,
here.
that was it.
Yeah.
And my first experience at the Grand Prix, and this is absolutely true, I was over in Adelaide the first year they had it there. We all drove over in our cars and stayed there and made
Is that where you raced ex-police
Yes,
cars?
that was subsequently, but the first, and I'm sitting up in the stand with a whole lot of people, and Ron Barassi, who, God love him, Ron, and he's sitting there, and Ayrton Senna, they're all on the starting grid, and they've got the 10-second clock before it starts, and the lights go on, and they rev the engines up, and honestly, and the bloke, the lights went off and the cars went off, and I look over, Ron's sound asleep beside me. I thought, if you could possibly sleep through that, you have no trouble with insomnia ever in your life. But I can almost take you back into Formula One days when the engines could be heard. That car there, which is a SV Lamborghini, that will sound like, I can get that to sound like, I'll get you to sound that like an F1 car. We'll just go over to it and we'll start it up, and you can see what we used to hear, but we're missing these days on Formula One.
I'd love to hear it.